Okay, can you hear me? Testing, testing. Thanks so much for coming to today's afternoon session. We're really delighted to be here at RFC in person again. And big thank you to Rose and Michaud. I'm going to introduce them a little bit more fully in a second. First up, we've got an apology, though, from Rickey Bryan, who was our grower kind of perspective on this session, and he's unable to be here with us today. So he sends his apologies. It's a kind of a mixture of health, work, family, and then travel. So it's a quadruple whammy. We do have, fortunately, a recent video from him. When was it? October 22 it was made. And it's 25 minutes long. We're not going to play that. But you will be able to find it on YouTube. Going to take a few choice clips from that, and that's really great because he talks about what he's passionate about and what's going on at his enterprise, and that was really at the heart of this talk. So we've tried to keep him here, even though he's not here, if that makes sense. So just a few of the broad. I'm not going to kind of go into the really broad themes to do with horticulture and how it's in a bit of a dire state potentially from certain angles, labour and energy, and there's all these big themes. Today we're looking a little bit at one strand of it, which is the idea that diversifying the produce could be a route into making it a more resilient sector. And I think it's quite established, the word diversity or diversifying within organics. We talk about it a lot to do with the growing system in terms of kind of pest management and bringing in diversity and biodiversity. So that's kind of well established, and well established as well in our diet. We understand that there needs to be a diverse range of foods that we should consume. That's kind of been hammered home quite a lot. I think probably the element that isn't so well established, and we're at the beginning of a journey with this, to be honest, is how do we encourage our fruit and veg to be essentially more inclusive and invite a range of different cultures in. So what does the horticulture sector benefit from inviting a wider range of voices and thoughts and ideas and cultures into it? That's really at the heart of the strand of today, looking at kind of exotic crops, if you will, but there are other terminologies which we're kind of look at as well. So, as I say, would have been brilliant to have Rickey here and his perspective in person, but there is some really interesting insight on the footage we have. So we've got Michaud here. In the 1980s, Michaud and his wife Joy, who's also with us today, started Peppers by Post, a market gardening enterprise that grew and sold chilies through the post. And from that venture evolved Sea Spring Seeds, a web-based company selling seeds of quality veg, including those found in Britain's immigrant communities. Since many of the seeds are generally unavailable through normal channels, they're produced on Michaud's nursery in West Dorset. So thank you very much, Michael, for joining us today and being here with your wealth of experience. So from his perspective, I suppose it's going to be a bit more about the market and how we can diversify through what he's done in terms of seeds, bringing different seeds to the market. And obviously that then can be grown into produce. We have Rose Lewis. She recently joined the Soil Association, working on an exciting project to develop a new food and farming hub, which I'm presuming is Woodoaks. Yeah, which is Woodoaks, which is going to be a large part of what we're going to be talking about today. And Rickey is starting an enterprise there, and he's coming up to, I think, the end of his first year there. And her ambition is to bring 25 years of commercial and startup experience to create new models for sustainable and local food systems. Her entrepreneurial mindset comes from experience starting a business accelerator, investing and supporting over 50 digital tech startups, and she is renowned for introducing disruptive ideas to organizations for positive transformation. So her influence or contribution today will be more about the collaborative venture that is Woodoaks and kind of reinventing the systems that we have in place for producing food, and collaboration being at the heart of that. And Rickey, Bryan, I'll just give his background as well. So as I said, he's just begun this journey at Woodoaks Farm, growing a new horticultural enterprise from scratch in under a year. It's actually very impressive what he's managed to achieve in 1 year. His Caribbean heritage and rich knowledge of growing techniques inspired him to set up Rickey's Alkaline Market Garden and Fruit Forest, and that opened its doors in September 2022, and accepting customers and visitors and volunteers. If you were to search for Woodoaks Farm, I actually think he's not open for volunteers or visits right now over the winter season, but just check the website. If you're in the area, he's love to see you and talk to you, and it's just off the motorway, M25 motorway. So he's a lovely guy, and I'm sure he would love you to drop in. And he is passionate about growing organically the way nature intended it. So to kick off today, we're going to have a bit of the video of Rickey's, and it will just kind of give a bit of that broader picture that I didn't give from his perspective. So it's about 5 minutes long. Fingers crossed.
My name is Rickey. What you're about to see here is years of hard work, labor of love, and tears of joy to bring to you what you're about to see. Farming chose me. Just before the recession, I used to do a lot of joinery and construction work in the building sites. And then I get a vision of a food crisis that's going to hit. Now, during that time, the UK was just about shaping up, to open up Europe, to bring in Eastern Europeans, Western Europeans, for the building construction. Yeah? And at that time, you could have gotten 3 or 4 contracts on the same site without any hesitation. When Europe opened, all of that changed. In that same time, I got my vision about food and how important it is. I used to follow a man by the name of Dr. Sebi, who used to tell us about alkaline food, what it does to the body. You should make your food be a medicine and your medicine be a food. And that set me on a journey to start finding out about where my food comes from, how my food is produced, who grows my food, what goes into my food, what does the food do to my body that I eat. And then by doing that, I start checking out things like making a difference. And then from that, I just start checking my energy levels. Then I start checking my kids' them energy levels. And then the rest is a no-brainer. It got me on a spiral journey where I had no attitude of no looking back and forward only in terms of finding out more and more about how food is produced, how food should be produced, and what good food does for the body versus what bad food does to the body. The general public has been fed a life for decades, for millennia, and even though we are what we eat, we're living in a society and a time now, we are what was marketed to us. We are here to try and change that by saying that there's an alternative. And we don't want to do that by putting into fancy branding and fancy words that people can't understand. We want to show by producing the food that when you taste it, you come back for more, and you go and tell your friend, and you go and tell your family, and you feel it in your body and your bones. And when you go to the doctor, you can tell the difference. If we get yourself caught up in a downward spiral, and I say a downward spiral because it's only go one way down, and you're going to end up dead, even though all of us have to die. If we continue this downward spiral into food without knowing what food does for the body, we're not going to be here for much longer. Our kids are not going to have a future. 3, it's going to mess up the ecosystem. It's not viable. We've been led to believe that monoculture cropping and other type of growing can save the planet. Now we are seeing its effect. We don't have to be led anymore. We can see it with our own 2 eyes. We can feel it on our skin. We can see it when we go in the supermarket. Many times I go in the supermarket for lunch and I spend an hour just to come out with a bread that I don't want because there's nothing I can find to sustain myself. Only something that can fill a gap for I can carry on doing. We need to change that. We need to change that culture. And doing what we're doing here and practicing the different techniques that we're doing here is one way of doing it. Now, as a youth growing up in Jamaica, grew up around a lot of Rastafarian. And from as far as I can remember as a child, Rastafarian has always been talking about natural growing of food, going back to nature, learning from nature, and sticking with the ecosystem. I come from organic food is an organic way of living, is a way of life. It's nothing that is marketed, branded.
Vegan food, we know it as
was ital food. And ital
new branding is trying to take it out.
But you see, the root is the root. And without the root, you can't have no tree, you can't have no branches. So all of these little branches and all of these little leaves that are flying all over the place, it's all derived from the teachings of Rastafari.
Yes.
And I'm living examples of that. If it wasn't for the teachings of Rastafari, I wouldn't be here today. If it wasn't for the teaching of my grandfather that is instilling in my mind how food is from a very tender age, I wouldn't be here today. Spin that round and fast forward it. Can you imagine what has been instilled in these 6-year-old and 7-year-olds' mind today? So in the next 10, 15 years, they know nothing about their food if we carry on this downward spiral. And if we can't sustain our family, if we can't sustain the way we eat, if we can't sustain the way we store our water, the way we deal with each other in the community, then we're on a downward spiral to nothingness. Can only lead to one thing: negative behavior, negative attitude, and a generation of vipers. And you're seeing it happening in and around every community, all around the world. It doesn't matter if it's a rich community, a poor community, or a middle class community. Thing is happening all around the world. And it leads right back to the food.
Right. So I hope you got a sort of sense of Rickey's there, and we've got a few more videos. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what Woodoaks is doing, really around how we're trying to provide a platform and the environment to encourage much more diversity and collaboration on farms. I'm just going to get my computer up, because my notes are here. So Woodoaks Farm is a farm just northwest of London, based at Maple Cross, the intersection of the M25 and the M40. It's a Soil Association Land Trust farm owned, and we got gifted the farm about 2 years ago with some specific ambitions, and I'll talk about that in a little bit in a minute. But really it's about trying to provide today, talking about how we're doing this sort of collaboration and providing the environment and a platform for multiple growers. So you can see from the picture, it's about 300 acres. It's a mixture of pasture, woodland and arable. Some sort of buildings, and like many farms across the UK, there's a lot of buildings on site that are not fit for purpose anymore, so we've got to try and figure out what we do with those buildings. You can't really talk about Woodoaks Farm without mentioning this lady. So Sally Finley and her family, the Finleys, lovingly farmed the Woodoaks for about since 1922. They came down from Scotland with their special way of rotating on a 7-year rotation. But like so many farms across the UK, over the last 40 years, it dramatically changed, going from very much a small mixed farm with multiple diverse crops to eventually really down to just 3 arable crops and a few cattle. The dairy shut about 5 years ago. They couldn't make it work. And all that time, they were just thinking that there could be a different and better future for the farm. And when John Finley, Sally's husband, passed away, she felt that that was the time to actually figure out what to do to be able to create that more sustainable future for the farm that was more in tune with nature and that would actually enable to bring people back onto the farm. A chance meeting with Ruth West and Colin Tudge meant that we got introduced, and in 2020, Sally decided to gift part of the farm to the Soil Association Land Trust with this very much shared vision of what that future could be like. And that is really about safeguarding the productivity of the land for nature and in tune with people. So, as Hugh mentioned, our goal really is to build a vibrant food and farming hub that really provides that fresh, organic fruit, veg and other products to our local community. We've got 250,000 people within a 5-mile radius of the farm. That's quite special. And it's also right next to the M25, as I mentioned, and that provides this platform to allow us to actually influence a much larger number of people. So we want this farm very much to be a place where people and nature can thrive together, and empowering communities to reconnect back to where their food comes from and the nature and the importance of nature where it comes. And we've talked a lot about that during this conference today. At its heart, though, it will be a planet-friendly organic farm growing as diverse agroecological products as we can get, and increasing the biodiversity on the farm. Obviously, that needs to build resilience. I'm going to get this right. Build resilience in terms of climate change, but very much with Sally's botanist and nature-loving history of her. She really, really wanted us to bring nature and biodiversity back onto the landscape. When we set out this path, though, we felt there were some critical things that would need to happen in order for us to be able to achieve our ambitions. And this first one really is about creating the opportunity for diversity on the landscape, and this is where people like Rickey have come in. We see this idea that we want to open up the landscape to multiple growers. Right now, and certainly when we took on the farm, we had a tenant farmer. They employed almost 2/3 of a person. And that's in a landscape of 300 acres. Just with Rickey alone, he's brought him two of his other founders, so suddenly there's 4 people on the land, plus all the volunteers, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But really the idea of bringing different people onto the farm to enable us to create new opportunities for those new entrants, but equally increase the diversity of the crops that we're actually growing. The second part was really this idea about reconnecting communities back to growing food. Again, this conference has talked a lot about disconnection. Consumers are consumers, they consume what's in the supermarkets, and really the idea was to be able to reconnect those people back to the farm so they could understand what it takes to grow food and what it takes to get that food onto their plate. This was a really, really important part of our objectives and what we were trying to achieve to do what it was. And as I mentioned, 250,000 people on our doorstep presents us with this great opportunity. And obviously, if we're going to achieve some of the ambitions around ecological and biodiversity, we need absolutely for people to change the way they think about food and nature, and actually absolutely understand that they are complicit in the nature and biodiversity loss and the climate change by the fact that they 3 times every single day of all of our lives, we make a decision about what food we eat. And really the ambition here is to try and get people to understand that actually we can all be empowered to make a difference by just changing how we consume and produce food. So what have we done so far? So we've onboarded 2 growers now. So Rickey was our first one. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we've also just today onboarded a second grower, and they're going to be focusing on fresh cut flowers, which is very exciting. So Rickey took on 5 acres, and the new flower grower is doing 1 acre. So straight away, within almost a 12-month period, we've got 6 acres under new cultivation, and that's been inspiring to watch. Rickey is an amazing story, and he may well talk about this in his video, but the farm was being conventionally run. It had arable, and October last year we put a herbal lay down, and Rickey came in about March. So that herbal lay didn't really have that long time to work, but what Rickey did was, rather than dig it all up, he basically just put everything on top. And so all the work this herbal lay was doing on the soil, actually he has then benefited from it. And he will even admit that herbal lay has, what he says, supercharged his veg growing this year. And you saw some of the vegetables that he's growing. I mean, it is really incredible how much has grown in such a short period of time. And it is really, really luscious to walk along there, which literally a year ago it was a horrible arable field, but not that horrible. It was still producing food. We've also reduced the size of our field, so the Rickey field was a 20-acre field. That's obviously now got 2 5-acre plots and then 1 acre plot. And then the rest of that ambition for that field is we're going to open up this 20 acres to other growers along the way. We also reduced our field size by reintroducing hedgerows, and we're doing a lot of hedgerow planting on the farm. And that has been amazing for bringing the community onto the farm. Just putting a note out there to say who wants to come and plant hedgerows, and getting them to understand that value and why we were doing the hedgerow planting has been amazing. And you can see some of the photographs there. Someone said to me, let's launch a compost club. And I'm like, you what? What is even a compost club? But we did, and we launched a compost club about 6 months ago, and I can't believe how many volunteers come every single week and shovel shit for us. And so we're using the platform of the farm. We've got cattle and horses, and we use that manure with our wood chip and all the other stuff that we can do. And we get volunteers to come in, and we are just making this amazing, just so worm-ridden compost. But again, what it's doing is it's just basically reconnecting people back to the land. And this guy, Vidya, he said to me the other day, do you know, Rose, there's more microorganisms in soil than above the land? And I'm like looking at him, and he's going, oh my God, you know all this, don't you? Why are you looking at me like that? I'm like looking like that because where did you get that from? Well, how do you know that? And he's like, I planted your hedges, I've now been involved, and I'm really getting into this. And that, you can see that power of reconnection. And he'll go into he's brought all his family along as well. So that's just an amazing step forward for that what it is. So, why is all this important? And I think it's worth just sort of spending a bit of time on this, first of all. We know that new entrants and smaller growers have got a challenge with accessing land. So by getting us to divide our landscape up and offering them smaller packets of land gives them much, much easier entry points into the landscape. And so that's really very much what we've been trying to do, to encourage not just diversity of crops, although we can do that, but it's about diversity in the people who farm. As I said, our farm, when when we took it on, 2/3 of a person. Now suddenly we've got 3 or 4 growers who are running their own businesses on the farm and therefore employing people and creating local opportunities for people along the way. And they're also sharing their knowledge. Rickey has got some amazing knowledge and he's been able to share that with some of the other growers, even for the old tenant farmer who's learning something from Rickey. It also brings in, obviously, diversity of crop, and we're talking about how do we create diversity in horticulture here. What's been interesting is to see the types of crops that Rickey has been growing, and some of them are very unusual to our local community. We're obviously in a fairly sort of white environment in the immediate vicinity, but we do have a wider ethnic group up in Watford. But some of these crops have never been grown here, and one particular is callaloo, which is amaranth, and so that's the one down there on the left-hand side. So it's basically like a spinach. But it's very sort of Jamaican, and amaranth actually turns into a grain and is used for all sorts of things. But none of our volunteers had heard of it. Rickey was going on about how wonderful it was, and a lot of them would say, "What's that? What's that?" But actually what was so good is because they were there helping grow the stuff and plant it and nurture it, they were then, okay, well, I'll try it. So they took it home, Rickey gave them some recipe ideas, and literally within 3 or 4 days they were sharing all their recipes on the WhatsApp group we've got. And now you just know that this time next year, when that amaranth crop comes in again, they're just going to start buying it. So it's just really fantastic to be able to get people to see firsthand the types of crops that they could be eating rather than just going, obviously, to our supermarket. And then the chilies and all sorts of other array of crops that he's doing that just gets people just to think beyond just the classic fruit and vegetables that we find in our supermarkets. And I think as well it's not just Rickey. We have the flower grower. We've also got a brewery on site, the Compost Queen, and then we've also worked with a nutritionist who's been helping us communicate what it is that you can do with some of the vegetables and the fruits and the vegetables that Rickey is growing, and hopefully some of the other things that we're doing. But I think what this brings to our farm is not just that new skill and that learning, but it also brings capacity. It's pretty hard to run a farm, and as I said, it's very hard to run a farm with lots of people. But the fact that we've got these people on our farm means that we're building just capacity to do more stuff. So we've been able to run school visits this year, we've been able to run corporate volunteerships, and as part of our tenancy agreement with all of our growers, we put in that we asked them to do this sort of 2 days of education each year, and that's written into the thing, and they do that with us, and they want to do that with us, but it just means that we can do so much more. So instead of doing 1 open farm visit a year, we're going to do 20 next year, and then what we're doing then is bringing a more diverse range of people to do. And then there's the community aspect of having more farmers involved. It's a lonely business sometimes, running your own business in itself, but being a farmer as well when you're quite isolated just means that actually we've been able to create this collaborative community that again is not just learning skills and learning from each other, but keeping people company. I think the important part of farming, though, and part of what we're going to do in order to ensure that we give people the ability to make different choices when it comes to food is giving them access. Our farms have to be open and accessible, and I think that's a really important part of what we're doing, and certainly Sally's vision. We've got, I don't know, 3 public rights of way across the farm. So lots of people did come, especially through lockdown. But what they're doing is they're walking through fields of arable. They probably have no idea what is even growing. They don't understand that connection back to food. So by opening up places like Rickey's and hopefully the flower grow and getting them to plant hedges means that actually they're more able to see and reconnect back to that food system. So next time they walk up, and I'll just tell you, so you walk up the track, there's Rickey's, and I don't know whether you noticed on the video, but his beds are curved, and the idea of that, they're curved that way, is as the water runs off, it stores the water in a much better way. So Rickey, being Jamaican, he comes from a water scarce environment, so he understands how to collect water in that way, whereas we just put a tank on and hope that we'll harvest or put irrigation. So it's really interesting. So that's what people are looking at. They're looking up and, oh, well, why is it curved? And that provides a great talking point as well. So it's really just about keep on educating everyone who comes through the door. We've also had, because we're near 3 schools, and we've been able to open up for school visits. We've had a huge variety of kids through the door, and again, it's amazing to see them in this environment where they're able to even plant stuff and pick stuff and really be able to reconnect that back. And that's been good as well. And we've been able to run sort of butterfly walks and bird walks, again, getting at that wider variety of people onto the farm. And this, for me, is a really, really important aspect of bringing diversity, because if we're not having diversity of the audience of people who are buying our organic, diverse products, we're not going to do enough, and it needs to be affordable. And that's a challenge, I know, but there may be some ways that we can do that with this collaborative community that we're building. So this comes on to the sort of the other sort of areas that we're trying to bring to enable that diversity and encouraging new horticulture, is with the fact that we've got multiple entrepreneurs on site means we can go and access different markets. So rather than just going with Rickey's, we've got cattle, beef, and we've got hopefully the flowers, and then we'll have a bakery and all this sort of stuff. And it means that we're more able to go to potential customers and do potential deals with them. And so we hope in the future that we'll actually be able to start working with schools and provisioning them with at least some element of their food that they're serving in their canteens. That's a bit of a long-term thing, but we're hoping to get there. Let's just do the next one. And then this idea of a whole farm approach that enables the efficiencies that we can be able to achieve. So if you've got 20 acres that's been managed by 2 or 3 growers, they can share packing houses, they can share chillers, they can share machinery, and then perhaps most importantly, they can also share customer bases. And so for everyone who's for finding new customers, they can then share right across the board. And so really it's about driving efficiencies so that small growers are much more able to be able to actually be economically viable, because if they're not economically viable, then we're not going to get the diversity that we need. And this comes really to what else we're doing around just really stacking enterprises on top of Woodoaks and getting that benefit that I talked about. And there's sort of things here, we've talked about shared infrastructure and common markets, but there's also this sort of marketing and advertising amplification effect. So Rickey, he's got his own Instagram, the flower grower will have, and the various other businesses on the site that are each amplifying everyone else's messages. And then Woodoaks Farm themselves has also got that platform that's pushing out into that open market. And really the idea is then to actually boost everyone along the way to be able to achieve that sort of audience development that you so need for some of these fledgling businesses. And I think that's been really important. And then opening up new revenue streams. Again, I mentioned capacity. It's very difficult for you to be able to have access to new revenue streams when you're so focused on just delivering your core product, which is maybe veg growing. But with the idea of having the use of our barns and the platform that Woodoaks, we're more able to enable those growers to perhaps run courses and foraging workshops and things like that will be much more able to boost their income, so it's not just solely on the veg power itself. And then obviously the common learnings and the common the commons on the farm, for example. So the compost club is the commons. Everyone can have access to the compost club, and longer term there'll be other sort of shared infrastructure things that we do. We're really early on in our journey, and I think if people are sort of considering any of the sort of stuff we hear, I just sort of mention some of the key learnings that we've done. We put out an invitation to attract some new growers last year, and we were overwhelmed by response. But actually we probably weren't ready because we didn't have the right infrastructure in place and the right planning permissions. And so actually now I think we're much more able to be able to do that. And I listened to you guys earlier, for a lady here from the Kindling Trust, just about being over-prepared. And actually that was a way better idea because we were totally under-prepared. And so there's a sort of balance, because sometimes you just got to get going. Nothing will be perfect, and we learnt a lot along the way. But it's just about understanding, okay, well, if you're going to start working with new growers, they need an enormous amount of support, and to get them to growing as quickly as possibly they can with any hustle is a much better way of doing it, rather than perhaps the journey that me and Rickey have been on. And if he'd been here today, he'd be telling you this. So. And really just about just giving them the support in terms of that sort of the not necessarily the financial support, although that's a big one, and because coming onto a farm like ours, we've been able to provide the infrastructure, then that really does give that support to new growers, and I think that's a really important thing for people. And then to be able to work with them on business planning, financial planning, and given my background, I was quite good at this, so just really those kinds of support to ensure that actually ultimately all of our growers are successful, because that's the way we're going to achieve things. I just thought I'd mention that actually many of you have probably heard some of this before, and before I took this role I did quite a lot of research and spoke to some lovely people, and so I just thought I'd give them a shout out here. Wakelins is doing some great stuff up in Suffolk around enterprise stacking and bringing diversity on. I spoke to Abbey Home Farm, Kindling Trust I looked at and devoured your business plan, and various other people, Balcussie Estate, Falkland Estate, all of these, some really great people doing some amazing stuff out there to try and bring diversity onto our farms. And so I just thought I'd shout that out. And I think that is it in terms of today was about celebrating what we've achieved at Woodoaks. And although we haven't gone that far yet, it's about sharing stories to ensure that actually all of us do what we all want to achieve through what we're doing in farming and fooding. And I leave you with the brown butterfly. The first time we saw that for 20 years on Woodoaks Farm this year.
Thank you, Rose. So we're just going to break up the next presentation with another video clip from Rickey. Is the presentation still live there? Brilliant. So yeah, two further clips from Rickey, and then we're going to move on to a very patient Michaud. So the first one is kind of, it touches again on that theme of bringing in the local community and what it means to him to be producing food at the site where he's based and the kind of markets he's looking, and what his kind of vision for what he's trying to do there in terms more from a people's perspective. So.
Environment. Here also at Rickey Market Garden and Food Forest, we are trying to show that even though we're growing local produce for the local community, we are also bringing in exotic food for the local community. Because in any local community, there is diversity, just like in the forest. So you would have black, white, Chinese, Muslim, Jews, Christians. All these people come from different ethnic backgrounds with different cultures, eat different food. We are trying to supplement everybody, but without leaving out anybody. So by bringing in exotic foods, we are showing that we can take off the air mileage off of, we can cut down our carbon footprint, we can show easily trace for food if it should go bad or something should go wrong in a pandemic or an epidemic. And we also show that by moving from farm to farm to the plate on your dining table or in your kitchen, we are showing also that we can make more incentive to the farmer rather than it goes from the farm to the packaging house, to the washing station, to the branding house before it actually gets on your shelf, before it actually gets on your dining table. The full benefits of that is more mineralizations to your body. You get more active, so you're out and about, fresh air in your lungs. You're bringing the families together, you're bringing the community together, because far too long we're growing in a community where we don't even know our next door neighbor. We don't even know the person across the road. We pass each other our children go to the same school and we don't even know that. By starting to come for local produce in the farm place and people shopping and smiling and tasting different types of food and see what it does for the body, by shopping together, you bring the community together. And you know that unity is strength. If you have a twig, you can use a finger or two and break it. But if you have 5 or 10 twigs, you can't do it in the same motions. A lot more energy needed to break it. So unity is strength. And by bringing the community together, we can show that people power is the real power. Because we have the authority to change hearts and mind, and to change the quality of the food we eat, and to change the manner in which we respect and go about trusting and loving each other. And I'm doing all of that through farming. Because in any war and in any battle, you can't win the war unless you can feed your army. And if you can't feed your children, then the next generation is doomed.
How does someone cultivate callaloo in England? Speak to me about callaloos in England. Very fascinating.
Growing callaloo in England was a journey. We started off with Scotch bonnet pepper, and we realized very soon that it couldn't grow much outside, and we started growing in the greenhouses. Then we started testing other crops from the tropics, and we came across callaloo. Now, for callaloo to be growing here, first thing we had to do was get the seeds from our native country, and the next thing we had to do was climatize it. Once we climatized the seeds, we started growing. We find that we even started competing callaloo looks with even our tropical country that we came from, Jamaica. And as we know, we have a saying, when you check it out, Lord, no we're no better than yard.
Yeah.
Sometime.
So the final clip is just a couple of minutes, it's a bit shorter, but goes into, yeah, a bit more on the properties of callaloo.
Callaloo, affectionately known, botanically known as amaranth, which used to be grown by the Aztec. Feel free to go by, no problem. It's rich in iron. It's one of the only vegetables that's a vegetable, and it's also a grain. The grain is used to make flour. The flour is so rich and so expensive, it cannot be sold on the local, on the normal market as a flour. It is used as an additive flour for other flour. The grain is used to make oil from, for the cosmetic industries, for Q-Tex, lipsticks, and loads of other stuff that we're now learning. Germany, as a country that produces so much, imports millions and millions of pounds of callaloo seed for the cosmetic industry, for the flour industry, and for various other additives for feeding livestock, and for other things like shampoos and all kind of skin products. Callaloo, amaranth, is a very powerful plant, and I'm surprised to know that so many learned people on this side of the planet don't know about it. But that's why we are here. And thank you, Black Magic, for making this possible and for bringing your skill set to the trade so we can get the message across. Black Magic Music is always a blessing, and thank you for being here.
There we go. So that video is available on YouTube, and I think it's really inspiring. When I couldn't believe that he'd made that video actually, because it's just a bit of a gift in his absence. Obviously it's not ever going to be the same, but gives a really vibrant impression of what he's trying to achieve and what he's already achieved, and what could the potential be in the next 5 years, 10 years. What's happening there is already really exciting, and the transformation is already happening. If you could get up the next presentation, Michael's, that would be brilliant. We're going to hear Michael's next.
Can y'all hear me? Can you hear me? Do I sound weird? No, I don't. Okay. You didn't notice the American accent then, did you? Okay. Look, what we're going to do, before we start, I just want to get some terminology, because this thing, what's the name of the session? Exotic? And I had a thought about what exotic actually means. We're going to do it Bob Dylan style. Remember Bob Dylan? Anybody familiar with that video of his? Where I love it. Exotic, what does it mean? About 20, 30 years ago, I was in Sandwell, and I went into some of the shops up there. I think probably Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Jamaican, one of those shops. And I marvel at all the exotic vegetables, all the vegetables I didn't know, all that strange thing, and it was marvelous. But then when you start thinking about what exotic means to those people actually buying it and cooking it on a regular basis, it wasn't exotic at all. And likewise, 30 years later, after I visited those shops, those same vegetables actually aren't that exotic to me anymore. So I think when we use that term, we have to be just slightly, it's not about political correctness, but it's about perspective of who's saying it and who you're addressing. So we've got to be a little bit careful about that term. All right? The other thing I want to talk about is what I call vegetable neutrality, and you've never heard about that. Now, what vegetable neutrality means is vegetables in and of themselves don't, and I'm talking multicultural, don't take on a cultural identity until they're cooked. And I'll give you an example of this. Just in the town closest to me, about 5 miles away, is Bridport in Dorset. Now, if I start off at one end of the high street, I come to the Chinese takeaway, and what I'm going to use the example of a bitter melon. Does anybody know what a bitter melon is? You do, okay. What it is, it looks like a cucumber, ridge cucumber with warts on it, and it's bitter. So if I walk down High Street and I stop at the Chinese takeaway, Mr. K-U-N in there is going to call it fougua. If I carry on a little bit further and I come to the Taj Mahal restaurant, as owned by a friend of ours, a British Guyanese Indian woman, she's going to call it Corella. And if I walk across the road down to the bottom of the High Street and I go into the Thai takeaway, Na is going to call it Marat. Now, at the end of the year, if I have any leaves left over in vines, I phone up my Jamaican mate. He comes down, he takes it away, dries it, and he makes cerce tea out of it. So what we have here then is one vegetable, more or less the same, 5 identities, if you include mine. So when we, again, use the term exotic, use the term cultural, it really, vegetables don't know national boundaries. They just sort of exist. All right? So remember that when you do it. So, but what you do have to remember, though, is whenever you grow any vegetable that you're not familiar with, is you need to be aware of the temperature needs. Are they tropical, subtropical, temperate? How far north will they go? I mean, I think Rickey's example of growing callaloo in northwest sun is a perfect example. Even though we associate it as a temperate crop, he's managed to grow it as far north. But that's true of anything. Does it grow in a tunnel or greenhouse? Can it grow outside? And how far north can you go? And that's absolutely essential. So that's fixed. That's not a subjective term. That's fixed specifically. Now, I'm here to talk about marketing. Hold on. Marketing, right there. All right? Now, there's 5 things. When I think of marketing, I think of 4 things. I think of production. Obviously, we're producers. So we've got to grow these things. And then I think of delivery. How are you going to get it to your customer? I mean, with us, it's retail. How do you deliver that? I mean, obviously, if you're growing pumpkins and winter squash, your delivery system is going to be different than if it's spinach, for example. The shelf life, weight, and that sort of thing. And so that's production and delivery. The other part of marketing is publicity and advertising. You've got to let people know about it. And then the other one, the last one, of course, is sales, because that's what you ultimately want. Okay, now that's just that. Now it's the talk. All right? So are we all right on those terms? Right, so delivery of new foods to the market. Notice I definitely avoided the term exotic quite nicely, I thought. Okay, so Peppers by Post. We started Peppers by Post in 1993, and we had it for about 20 years. And the whole premise of it was fresh chilies produced, picked, and posted directly to your door. Now, we did not do anything new. Chilies have been grown in this country since the 1500s. Tabasco hot sauce has been sold since the late 1800s in this country. And also, to be honest, if you were Thai or Italian or Bangladeshi, Jamaican, chilies have been and are a regular feature of the cooking. So they're not new. But what we did do is we had homegrown, we posted them by first-class post, delivered the next day, and the byline was it's fresher. It couldn't be any fresher than if you grow them yourself. And that's what we did. Now, we were lucky. When we first came here, we were growing leeks and cabbages and that sort of thing. It just didn't work out. I just couldn't see myself growing leeks for the next 30 years of my life. I mean, really. So what we did, we were convinced to grow chilies. And we were lucky. It's a heat-loving crop. And we already had the tunnels, and we had some experience growing it. So we decided, sure, why not, as one does. But it's quite a fortuitous crop, because if you look at the chili fruit, they're lightweight, they're high value, and they have a long shelf life. Now remember, we're sending these through the post. And normally, back in the day, postal service was overnight. But every so often, it gets stuck in the local post office, and it might get there 2 or 3 days. But with long shelf life, customers really didn't know it. So that was quite essential for that. All right? Now, pricing, we really didn't have much precedent for that. But what we did do right from the beginning was set a price that we thought we could make a decent profit from. There's no point in growing it if you can't make money out of it. I didn't say we made a living from it, but we had a decent income from it, and we were quite happy with what we had. Now, what we didn't do, we were certified organic. We did not sell it as organic, because we set a high price, and we wanted people to feel it was set because that was a really special food. And we felt that we would actually put people off if we sold it organic. Sorry, guys, it was a decision. I think it was the right decision, and I'd make that same decision today. I think it's just about not being snobbish about it, but just how am I going to deliver it? And there's completely analog marketing. Yes, believe it or not, a paper catalog. And we retail in small quantities. All orders are made with the paper catalog that we sent out, and all the orders were paid for by check. This isn't comparing, but you know, it was what we did. And you take what you have and you do it. We were lucky because there was a woman at the time named Dodie Miller, and she had Cool Chili Company, and she had already established a business selling dried chilies through the post. So she allowed us, for the first 2 or 3 years, she allowed us to include our catalog for fresh chilies with her one for dried chilies. So we were lucky to do that. We also had, there's a Guild of Food Writers, we sent some press releases out to them. No advertising. We couldn't afford it. But at that time, we were lucky because there was a nascent development of a food culture in this country. We had starting of food festivals, things like that, so we were quite lucky. Eventually, we did have a website. No online purchase. The only thing you could do was download a catalog. That's all you could do, print it up. Never have an online shop, not for this business. Now, who's our target audience? And I can't emphasize enough, it's important to know it, but when you do something different, you have to know who your target audience is. I hate to say it, but ours was white, mostly middle class. Sorry, middle class. No, but anyway, it's mostly white, middle class, middle age. That's who they were, because that's who we knew the best. I mean, it's just being absolutely pragmatic about it. That's who we are. And you're going to market the best to that market that you know the best. We also felt that group had a disposable income, which we obviously wanted to tap into. And it was a large population. Makes sense. Choice of peppers. Right. What we went for was chili peppers that were generally not available in the greengrocers and supermarkets. And why do that? We couldn't compete. We couldn't compete against stuff being imported. Just couldn't do it. So we chose peppers according to ranges of shape, sizes, and heat levels that could be used in different styles of cooking. And we had about 9 varieties in total. Plus tomatillos and epazote. Are they common now, tomatillos? Not uncommon, yeah, more or less. Anyway. So the important thing is, and I got to stress this again, if you're doing something different, you got to have seeds. You got to have a good seed source. They've got to be dependable. They've got to have good germination, and they've got to produce a plant that it says on the pack. We've had seeds switched on us, and if you got bad germination, especially because you could lose 2 weeks if you had to re-sow. And in the life of a chili plant, that's a long time. So make sure you know who your seed source is. In other words, stay away from eBay. Who are these people? No, I mean it. I'm quite serious. You've got to be careful. So we had sources of seeds. Some of them were imported. We had to import some stuff from the States. Just weren't available in this country. So they included Joe's Long Cayenne, which was a long, thin one, about 30 feet long. 30 centimeters long. Brilliant, yeah. Yeah, it was really hard getting into that box. One of my favorites is poblano. It's a Mexican one. It's fairly big, thick flesh, quite mild. Chile serranos, that was a very popular one for us. There's Anaheim. Again, these weren't readily available. It's again popular in southwest southwest U.S. cuisine. Fairly large, fairly thick, fresh, quite mild. And of course the tomatillo. When we had to buy in tomatillo seed, you could not get tomatillo seed in this country to save your life. So we had to import it from the States. So, UK suppliers. Now, we were able to get some seeds from UK suppliers, but these were available to the gardeners. The cooks didn't know about these. So we were able to buy a few. That's my desert island vegetable right there. That's the one, if I'm on a desert island, it's Hungarian hot wax. From a grower's point of view, it's early, it's easy to grow, it's very versatile, it's not over hot, wonderful variety. We had no trouble selling that one. That is my desert island. The other one is that we could buy quite readily was habanero, orange habanero, again, quite hot, beautiful aroma to it. Quite late to mature, that was the only downside. And again, you have a very short window for chilies, but we managed it. And of course, the last one we had to have jalapeno, because people expect jalapeno. You could probably get it in the shops, but that's what we did. We had one that we home saved, Rooster Spur. I brought it back from the States when I came over here. It got orphaned. We couldn't buy it anymore, so we produced seeds of it ourselves. Very small, very, very hot. Perfect in Thai cooking when you make it som tom. Okay, so the selling point then was picked and posted on the same day. And that's, again, it's about different. What can we give our customers that no one else can? No one else was doing it at the time. And first-class posters that say, next day delivery. And we kept hammering that and hammering that and hammering that. Direct marketing, at the time we had the Westine Chili Fiesta. Now let me talk to you about direct marketing, or what I call face-to-face marketing. Going to shows, basically. And it's good because you make money on the day. It's a good way to make, you can collect new customers. You want them to buy, but hopefully they're going to buy from you later on, buy your catalog. And also you make contact with existing customers. That's really important. They like to put a face to that company name. So if you can do it, it might be worth doing. However, you do need a specific skill set. You need to have stamina. You got to pack the day before, you got to go to the show, you got to pack up when you get at the end of the day, and then you got to go home and unpack. So it does take a lot of stamina. You've got to be able to do mental math. You've got to be friendly. But most importantly, you've got to be patient. If you're selling something different, you're going to hear the same question 50 times. Now, my wife, she can hear that question for the 50th time, and she has that ability to make the questioner not only, she makes him feel that not only was that the first time she heard that question that day, but it was the most interesting question she had heard. And that's vitally important. I, on the other hand, I don't do shows anymore. I just don't have it. You know, don't ask me about tomatillos and how to use them, please. It just isn't going to work. So wholesale, we do a bit of wholesaling, restaurants and shops, and we were actually quite successful at this. We had Dodie Miller, the one that whose catalog we sent out with. She had a restaurant, a Santa Fe chain. Okay, thank you. Santa Fe chain, 10 restaurants. Thomasia Myers, you know, Oaxaca. We started to sell to her. And then we had some shops. One of them was, I don't know if you're from Edinburgh or Glasgow, but Lupe Pintos in Gledinburgh, owned by Doogie Campbell. And it was a Mexican-Spanish delicatessen. Who does that in Scotland? But it was uncanny. 2 weeks before they were ready to go, we get a phone call. And this went on for years. He just had an uncanny ability to know when these things were ready. No advertising, but what we did do, we did promote recipe sheets, which you talked about, cookery demonstrations at local food festivals, TV and radio, magazine articles. Now, what we found about the media is that they want something new. And if you can get one or two journalists to write about you, you're in. Because the other ones will just follow along. And it's a good way to do it. So it's worthwhile. And just start locally. We'll talk about that in a minute. We did have some failed attempts. First 2 or 3 years, a lot of it went on the compost heap. Fortunately, I had a part-time job as a soil association inspector, so that did give us some buffer. We also tried to break into the Mexican, and not break in, but sail-wise into the Mexican and American embassies. We just couldn't break it. We just couldn't get in. We don't know how. Joy would phone up. We'd say, yeah, we want to buy. We thought there was a newsletter we could advertise in and everything. Just never worked, so we gave up. At about that time, we were doing a shop and garden search. Now, what I was doing, I'm going to read this. I started exploring the range of shops and market stalls representing the cultural diversity of Britain. Now, that's important. And that included supermarket chains and traditional high street greengrocers, and also shops catering to Britain's immigrant communities, Italian, Thai, Bangladeshi. Went to all of them, looking for new peppers. And this was in London, Bristol, Bournemouth, Sandwell, Leeds. So we're looking all over the place. Now, as a result of that, we found the Naga Chilli in the shop in Bournemouth. Now, the Naga Chilli it's a Bangladesh. We just found out that the Bangladeshi had a Naga Chilli, in which we became interested. Okay, we didn't discover it; they had it. So we're just moving in on that. So we bought some fruit, took it home, extracted it, grew it out. This was in the late 1990s. Now, the thing is about the Naga Chilli, which we named Dorset Naga, it was a variable land race. That's one thing to know. Each plant was a little bit different than the other. So we started to make selections to smooth out the population. It took years. Joy says 8 years. I'm not so sure about that, but it did take years. And I say we named it Dorset Naga. Now, what we did was we then measured the heat, because the customers kept coming back and saying it's really, really hot. The results we came back was almost 1 million Scoville heat units. Now, if you think it sounds like a lot, it is. At the time, it was one of the hottest chilies in the world. But we didn't feel comfortable, because this just doesn't happen to people like us. It just doesn't. So we thought we're going to lay low, control the narrative, go to our local Bridport News, and we knew the reporter. They said, look, we've got this hot chili. Why don't you just report it, just locally? What we didn't know was that all these little local newspapers are tied into bigger newspapers who are always scouring them for news. 24 hours, it went worldwide. It went viral. And we were surprised. It's scary. You think it's fun, but it's not. At least I don't think it is. But as a result of that, we started new markets. The heat level attracted a lot of publicity. People wanted seed, which we started to sell in 2007. It's the power of the internet. So as a result of that, we started Seaspring Seeds. It's a vegetable seed company specialized in capsicums. And we'd been growing chilies for years, and we had experience with a lot of varieties. Again, just opposite to Peppers by Post, we had no printed catalog. It was only online. Yep, back in the late 20th century. Finally made it, didn't we? Now, the seed sources, they're both bought in. These are the chilies. We're going to focus on that. Chilies and sweet peppers. They're bought in, and they're home produced. Now, we buy some in because it just takes the pressure off us. And also, if you buy them in, if people know a particular variety, they can Google you and hopefully get you a website, and then they look at find the other varieties and maybe show an interest. Okay, so we bought in some, and we had a lot of different varieties that we produce seed of. So what we're doing is we're selling 130 capsicum varieties. The word hoarder just sort of slips off the tip of the tongue, doesn't it? It is, and it's true. I just can't help myself. It's just, there's always something new. So we have 130. And of them, 94 varieties we produce seeds of ourselves. I don't know if that's to be lauded or condemned. It's up to you, really. It is a bit much. So some of the sources of our own seed is our own breeding. We had one on the left is Supertramp, and the one, okay, is that it? Okay, so it's 20 minutes, but are you all right if I go a little longer? Okay, that's 20 minutes, by the way. Almost done. So we did our own breeding, and one of them, the Supertramp on the left and the Pencil Cayenne on the right, they are dehybridized. We had two varieties that we really liked. We knew the seed company was going to drop them, so we dehybridized them, and we were lucky. We got almost an exact facsimile of them. And did they drop them in the end? They did. We were right to do it. Anybody can do this. It's that easy. The one in the middle is Fairy Lights. That was an off-type that we found in some plants that we grew, and then it was a bit variable, so we were able to straighten it out. The other one are the sharp searches. And these are just born, I just love them. One on the left is Frigiatello. It's a sweet pepper from an Italian shop in Peterborough, that's it. The one in the middle is Shivri Biber, which is Turkish, long, usually used green, grilled when you go to your Turkish restaurant. That's what they're going to give you. And the one on the right is Pacoshito, which is a Ghanaian variety, and that's probably the world's smallest bell pepper. The Pacoshito are really, really small. And you can almost tell, I've got to get, and then a lot of them are what we call orphaned. They've been sold by the seed companies, and then they drop them. And then we're stuck with them. And rather than take them out of the catalog, we produce seeds of it. That's how we ended up with 9, and they're still dropping them. So one last bit, the outlet for seed sales, the internet, obviously online shops, direct marketing, shows, festivals, so basically now the promotion and sales is a mix of digital and analog. We work hard at SEOs. If you're going to go online, you've got to know how to make SEO. You've got to be on that front page. And there's tricks to do it. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, hate them. Joy loves them. I just absolutely hate them. But equally important, emails and phone calls. She spends an hour a day on emails. You can't overlook that. That's as if you went to a festival and it's a face-to-face contact. It's one-to-one. And that's absolutely essential that you do that. Particularly on new things. People want to ask questions, don't they? Ask questions. How do I use it? What do I do? How do I grow it? All the time. Remember what I said about patience? We do advertise now, but we do it in gardening magazines, very focused. And we have articles on TV. Joy just had a big thing in 2020 on Gardener's World. You cannot pay for that advertising. That's anytime you get in a newspaper or magazine or TV show, it's an endorsement. And that's what you need. So work on that. And it's not hard. It really isn't. And we also have a seed rack at the Eden Project and the RHS Wisley, which is good. So it's getting there. So the take-home message is define your market. Absolutely. Especially if you're doing something new. You have to be very specific about it. Doesn't mean you can't change it, but you've got to know what you're doing. Use mixed marketing strategies. Again, we do a mix of analog and digital, and we do anything we have to do that we think is going to help. I do a pretty good cookery demonstration. The other thing is be flexible and willing to change. You are doing something new. It may not work. So either stick with it or change it, but try to stick true to your vision of what you want to do. And the last one is you really do need a dependable source of seeds, especially if you're doing something different that no one else. Where are you going to get that seed from? And a lot of it can be home produced. It really can be. All right, that's it. Right. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, Michael and Rose. But Michael, your honest portrayal and taking us on the journey of how you started from the very beginning to where you are now is really interesting. And there's so many nuggets in there. There's so many things that one can take away from that, even if sometimes it's that you were a little lucky here and there. But it's just refreshing.
Very lucky, yeah.
It's really refreshing to hear that's part of your journey. So we just want to open this bit up to being a bit more of a discussion. We don't have to use the full time. I appreciate it's getting to that part of the day. There is a mic. Thank you. There are a couple of online questions which I could kickstart with. Maybe we'll do that whilst you're getting any questions prepped from the floor. So this one I think will be for Rose. Are the growers tenants or partners or share farmers? What is the business structure, even if no rent is paid by the growers?
So they're definitely partners, but they are regularised through a tenancy agreement. So we've got sort of 5 to 10 year tenancy agreements. The long term for Woodoaks, though, is to try and formulate a different approach that allows us to collaborate in a kind of legal way as well as a non-legal way, but ultimately you need to start with everyone working together and then we figure out how to regulise it. So our journey is about trying to move towards a place where we all benefit from the whole farm approach. We just haven't figured out the model yet. So they're tenants, but definitely partners.
And one more online. Many flowers can double as edibles, and dahlia were originally grown for their tasty tubers. Is the flower grower likely to branch out?
She definitely has edibles already on her business plan, so yes. And we've got a cafe on site. They're really keen on using those edible flowers in their recipes. So yes, definitely. And it's really about what we're trying to do at Woodoaks is try and think, well, you know, we've got thousands and thousands of plants that we don't eat anymore, and we've lost the art of knowing what it is. And so really it's about trying to introduce new varieties, new options to our audiences, and edible flowers is a great example of that.
I'm just suddenly aware I don't think I welcomed the online people, but you know, welcome online people, and do feel free to pile in with some questions online. There were only 2 there sitting there, but we'll check those. Any questions from the floor for our 2 speakers? We could angle them a little bit at Rickey and try to answer that, because Rose does work quite closely with Rickey.
Thank you both. Very interesting presentations for both of you. Rose, I'm just wanting to link back to the session that I was in this morning, and I'm wondering if there are any opportunities for your partners in future to have some level of accommodation on the farm, just conscious of, as you try and hit those diversity targets, that can be a real barrier.
That is indeed a challenge for a lot of the farms who are trying to do enterprise stacking, is the ability to put accommodation. Woodoaks has got some cottages, but they're currently full, so there is no option. We're also in quite an expensive part of London, or west of London, and so actually an average house in the village is way beyond most of those things. I don't know whether you saw Wakelin's talk, but Wakelin's has done quite a lot of work with their local planning department to try and get accommodation onto their farm and get planning permission for it, because right now we have no ability to put any more housing on, and I think that's a real barrier that we've got to work through. Our first invitation to entrepreneurs was mainly to local people, and Rickey lives up the road from the farm, so it was perfect, as does the flower grower.
My question was for Michael. You mentioned a couple of times in your presentation that some of your seeds are things that you've rescued that other seed companies have dropped, and you've carried on growing them, and now you sell the seeds. What's your kind of plan for the future in terms of preserving those varieties if you're the only custodians of those varieties that are left?
Excuse me, I'm going to direct this to Mike. Did you hear her? Could you answer that question? Sorry about this. My hearing just doesn't, it's not picking, it's too bassy for me and I can't pick it up. Yeah, sorry about that.
Right, sorry, I'm Joy here, the other half partnership. As long as we're in business, we'll preserve them, but we have no longer term plan than that, because I don't know what would happen to them. But as long as we have Seaspring seed, we will be producing them, because they're tried and tested varieties, and gardeners, they latch on to varieties that they like, and the worst thing that can happen to a gardener is they want to grow it and they can't find the seed. So yes, we'll be keeping them going as long as we can.
Give some to Rickey, he'll grow them.
Hi, I'm a vegetable grower with a strong interest in chilies and peppers, and following on from what Joy just said, I noticed this year it's been more difficult to get hold of organic pepper seeds. I imagine Brexit might have something to do with that. Do you know why that might be? And going forward, what might be some ways of protecting ourselves against that in the UK?
I'm sorry, I just have to say Michael's hearing isn't very good. A lot of the problem getting hold of chili pepper seeds is because of Brexit, and seed now has to come into Britain, has to be tested, and it creates a barrier, and a lot of European companies are not sending seed in, so it is going to get worse. That's not just, I mean, I don't know what the situation is with organic, but that's generally seeds for the home gardener. And it's likely to get worse, I'm afraid. It's a problem, and we are going to keep going, keep the ones that we feel worthwhile, keep them going, but there are some which will be lost, and that's a feature of Brexit.
I might ask a question then for you, Michael.
Yeah, I can hear this one.
Yeah. So yeah, when you started out your journey, you said you kind of assessed, or you prioritised what you thought was like a white middle class, middle-aged foodies, right? And so was that 30 years ago when you?
That was 30 years ago.
And do you feel like, are you aware of who you've attracted, or what sort of benefits your varieties have provided for your customers? Do you have a sense of that?
I think we still grow Naga, fresh Naga, and is this okay? And what's happened is we've had a dichotomy in demands for it. We small, not quite big enough, but we're working on it. We do have the Bangladeshi market, and they want green. We had a shop in Brick Lane that we did sell to, and we do have some online orders. Not a lot, but we do. And we have people, the local Bangladeshis do come and visit us, and do get green chilies from us. Then on the other side of it, we have white sauce makers. They want them red, and that's when they're the hottest. That's what they do. The Bangladeshis don't care if it's the hottest. It doesn't matter to them. What the Bangladeshis like, it's a habanero type, and it has a really nice smell. And that's what they like, is that when they're eating the Naga, it's like a Scotch bonnet. It adds that flavor to the food, but they very seldom cook with it. They eat it raw, and it's just adding that smell and a little bit of heat, and they can manage it because they're nibbling on it. Whereas on the opposite end, as I said, it's the sauce makers. They want them red because that's when they're the hottest. Now, we know a lot of the local Bangladeshis, and they like to come to our place because one of the things that the way they want it, they don't want it green, they don't want it red. There's an interim period where it's just turning color. That's when they want it. I mean, we can't supply much of it at one time, but that's when they want it. So we do get a lot of visitors that way, and we want to. I think we want to expand that Bangladeshi market. I think we've talked about this because there's a lot of opportunity there because they do like their Naga, and we really want to focus on that as much as we can. So that's our next, among other things, that's our next project, to start earmarking the Bangladeshi market. Saying that's where we want to go. And there's certain opportunities for that. You have Islamic festivals. There's a Bangladeshi festival in Sandwell every year, and we just haven't managed to get to it. So we know where we want to go. And I say, know your market. And we sort of know, we're not sure how well we know the Bangladeshi market. We think we do, but we know they like their Nagas. So we're going to bring it to them. Is that a good response?
Great. Thank you.
Hi. Just a question for Joy and Michael. Have you found that you're selling fewer chilies because more people are kind of excited about growing their own from seed? And do you think that's something that, is growing?
I can't hear you. Didn't think about this, did we?
No, we're selling more. I mean, chilies have become more and more popular. So some people do save their seeds, but there's always something new to grow. If you're a chili grower, you might save your seeds, but you really get the bug and you want to try something different and try something else. So no, the chili market, seed market is definitely expanding. More and more people are growing.
I had two questions. The first is about another question about the tenancy agreement and some details with that. So I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on how, within the tenancy agreement with the stacked enterprises, how you deal with fixed infrastructure at the farm. So anything from barns and polytunnels and that sort of thing. And then more for Michael and Joy, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your growing methods have changed once you start focusing on one family of plants or one group of plants. So once you go for a niche market, I guess I'm thinking like a simple example would be rotations and whether you grow everything in the soil or in pots and that kind of thing. Thank you.
So from a tenancy perspective, we've got a fairly standard farming business tenancy agreement. What's in it though is the sort of values and the ambitions that we want all farmers to have. So that's around organic, sharing the knowledge, collaborating, and all that sort of stuff. It's almost like a sort of manifesto rather than necessarily a legal document, but it's very much tied into that farm tenancy agreement. And then in terms of that shared infrastructure, so for example, Rickey, he will put polytunnels on his site. He will own those polytunnels, we won't own them. But what we're giving him is the shared infrastructure that might go with those, sort of packing shed, a chiller and those sorts of things. And the goal is to bring those in as shared assets, and then we would devise a sort of small payment for having access to those shared infrastructure costs.
Could I ask a quick follow-up question? And how, I guess in terms of exit strategies, so say if Rickey wanted to move to another site, would it be assumed that he would either sell his, say the polytunnels, for example, or sell them to you, or is there some sort of exit strategy?
I think it will vary from depending on what grower. So say Rickey decides to exit food and farming completely, then I'm sure he'd then want to sell that whole kind of package of food growing infrastructure to the next grower. So I think it would largely depend on what would happen to that grower. But if the grower was going somewhere else, they'd probably want to take their infrastructure with them. So Rickey came from somewhere else, he bought some of that infrastructure with him. Yeah, does that make sense?
Is it mic on?
Yes.
I'll answer my question. When we did peppers by post, which we did for 20 years, we did grow the peppers in the ground, but we had enough tunnels so that it was every other year in each tunnel we swapped them around, and obviously the ground we had rested over the winter. And peppers aren't known for their root diseases, and that seemed to work okay. But we weren't comfortable with that, and that was one of the reasons why we decided to drop peppers by post. Now, with Seaspring Seeds, when we're producing seeds, we actually grow the plants in pots. So there's no issue with rotation at all.
Interesting.
Everything's in, greenhouses. Well, actually, for seed production, we actually have a lot of 26 small greenhouses, so that everything's all the seed crops are grown in isolation and things. But then we also got a lot of tunnels as well. But yeah, all the pepper plants now are in pots.
I don't think there's any more online questions unless I'm mistaken. So maybe just one last one from me to Rose, and then we can finish a bit early. I know it's just the beginning of the journey, but I just wondered whether you'd seen an expansion of the different people and cultures coming onto Woodoaks from when you started right at the beginning.
Yes, and I think it's interesting. So Rickey, because of who Rickey is, he's attracted a slightly different audience, and I think people sometimes feel alienated by, if they don't see people like them, they don't come. And I think what's been really interesting to watch is the different cultures and diversity of people. And we've got this volunteer who's in a wheelchair, and he's incredible, and we've designed loads of things to make him feel at home. And now suddenly we're getting other people who go, oh, well, I'm in a wheelchair, can I come? And it's just, you've got to see what you are to feel open and accessible. And I think that's what Rickey's done, is enabling just a different type of person coming onto the farm. And so that's we hope with more and more diversity, that will keep on bringing people forward.
Fantastic. I think we'll finish there, and thank you very much for coming, and thank you so much to Michael and Rose for your contributions and just really expansive knowledge, coming at it from quite a few different directions. I was quite excited putting this together, drawing the different angles, because I think there's a lot of different things that are being talked about that can be taken away from. Maybe you wouldn't have joined them all up. Maybe you would have yourselves, but I think there's a lot of synergies there with what's been spoken about. And as I say, you can catch Rickey's video online. Probably if you were just to search for, I can't give you the exact address, but if you were to search for his enterprise.
Rickey Alkaline Food and Farming, you'll get it.
Yeah. So well worth a watch and well worth a visit as well. So thank you again, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.